Hey, what's up, guys? Commander Jaime here, and holy shit, it was quite the weekend. So as you can tell from the title of the video, it is second place at the BCS Indianapolis August 2017 event. Boy, it was crazy. Basically, I was able to make it to day two, and I was still able to achieve my wins for those three Swiss rounds still remaining, and get into top eight myself. And then, of course, battling off in top eight, and I got as far as to the finals, and I got second. So, why Nightrose? It's basically, I think Granblue is still very strong. Even though it got the mic hit, it doesn't really matter, especially now since we have Galleon and, of course, our Fighters Collection G Guard that flips. So it's easier to get to GB8, and so the fear of decking out and not being able to finish your opponent by that time is not so often, and you're able just to win usually on the GB8 stride or before with Necrosanger or with Gauche or even Dragoot. And of course, being able to have one card in hand left, after guarding a barrage of attacks and just stride and still have like a field and being able to draw advantage and multi attack and all that stuff, you can come back out of nowhere. And so having the ability from Granblue, I thought it was still strong and it would take me far. And look at how it got me that far. So let's just get into it. So just like in my last profile, I still have Grenache as my starting Vanguard. I want to have him available to me right off the back so I can have consistency of countercharging. So that way your first strike Gauche turns are very strong, and you are able to reuse your counter blast for next turn, whether to for your turn or be in defensive, so you can have the Cannoneer play open for you in case you really needed that early on, or even just to weaken your opponent's barrage of attacks on their first stride. So having Grenache right off the back is amazing. Also worth to note, during regular matchups, let's say non-control, I usually ride the grade 1 and then pull him to the front row and have like a 7k booster like Negrabone ideally, or even a 4k crit trigger because they're going to go into Soul. A good choice is Rough Seas Banshee. And so ideally, I would attack with my Vanguard first, and then any triggers would be stacked on him. And if you got a 7k booster to their 7k Vanguard, then it's going to hit numbers regardless, even if they get a trigger. So applying that early pressure helps a lot in like finishing off your opponent as soon as you can. And the funny thing is that they won't try to kill it because it only helps you at the end. So having that option too helps. And then of course when you get to the grade 2s, when you ride to the grade 2, you have a 9k Vanguard, and then you have your 5 with either a 4k or 7k booster. So you have this L shape pattern to be early aggro in your opponent even on a grade 2 turn. So keeping up the pressure helps a lot, and it makes your opponent like, what the heck, I'm gonna have to like drop guard early on and hope for triggers and all that stuff. So that helps. The only time I don't call in a rear guard is against the Norikami matchup and Gears, specifically Vanquisher and Chronojet, because they can either bind it and it's gone forever, and Tiny Leap has Collarbone. So that's an instant minus, so you're better off keeping it in the Soul, and it actually helps with you first trying Gauche even better. So that's worth to note, and I've done that in the actual top 8 where I had to face off Gears twice. So having him in Soul allowed me to keep going with the pressure and have enough for an effective Gauche turn. So I just wanted to mention that. So the other grade zeros that I play is Chappie the Ghosty. In a sense, you can think of it as another copy of your cards from the grade 2 or the grade 1 lineup, and even from the grade 3 lineup like Nightstorm. So during the early game, you can actually just guard, and it's a 10k shield, which is really nice sometimes. And especially against rush decks like Sanctuary Guard or any rush kind of thing. So having the ability to see the King Serpent early on, that way you can first strike Gauche with it, helps a ton in your overall mid to late game. And also you could fetch out different pieces if you already have King Serpent, for example Cannoneer, Negro Lazy, Negro Rook, and Nightstorm, and sometimes even like Big. And also if you're facing off the Gears match, they'll probably spin your Grenache eventually, and so this helps at least getting out of the deck without you worrying too much that, oh, I need to fetch him out with Obadiah later on, or whatever, you know, it's like I won't have Counterblast to use next turn. So being able to like guard with this either from your hand or from the drop zone with the Negronora G guard, you can still get your Grenache back if that ever happens. So I play tested with 1 before, and I didn't see it often enough, and then so I bumped it up to 2, and boy did it help a lot. And so ever since then I kept it at 2. I recommend trying him out. Even though he's a little costly now because I think people just bought him out, so that kind of sucks. But he's still a good card. So I'm gonna go over the trigger lineup as well, and then I'll go up from 1 to 3 basically. Let me see if we can get off this glare. Sure, that works. So as you can see, we're still playing a crit. The idea behind these crits is that they still go into soul and they give you a draw. And of course you can plus up for them later in the mid to late game with Gauche and other strides that can bring multiple units at the same time, or even just using Nightrose stride skill to try to get a card back in hand, that kind of thing. So the nice thing about Rough Seas is that you, like I said, you can put it behind Grenache in the early game and start poking with like a 9k column and just keep applying that pressure. Same thing with Rampage, but ideally that works off when you're going first. So that way you ride a grade 3 Nightrose and it gets swooped up and you get the extra card. So when they're first turn stride on you, you have either a decent or good enough hand to guard if you need to, or take some damage and come back with a Gauche turn. So with the heals, Bernard is nice with the discard drop 1. I've used it a couple times during the tournament, and of course he's a ghosty, so the art's fantastic. I can't believe it, but he's came in clutch during the event, and what I mean came in clutch is because he just came when I needed a heal or damage, either in the damage check or a drive check, or even just drawing off of him from a Cannoneer play or some kind of defensive draw kind of thing. That way I can G-guard effectively and have enough shield for big attacks from whatever my opponent was just trying to dish out. And also, him being a heal trigger, you have access to your Negro Lily play with a Cannoneer. So you're probably wondering, you know, what the fuck? 3 Screaming Banshees and 1 mech. People had the choice to either do what I just did or 11 crit, and I've tried 10 crit and 2 mech before, and I ended up liking the stands more because Nightrose already multi-attacks. The only thing that it doesn't benefit from crits is that it doesn't have any restanders technically, like Aquaforce would, because you could stack a crit on a restander and you get twice the benefit off of that basically. And because we didn't have that, we have something else where we can get our units a little bigger, whether it's like a Rook being a 16k base, or something got a 10k from Mick himself, or Galleon, Gauche even, if you have enough cards in the G zone. I've hit numbers with those strides, and of course Mick and other units like that. So taking advantage of stand triggers while your opponent's at 5 is very, very helpful, and it's just another attack where if you restand a Negorook, it's at least 16k attack coming at them again, or if you give him the power, he's 21k, which is at least a 15k shield if they got no triggers defensively. So the one thing I really like about Screaming Banshee is that she actually has a useful effect, and there are times where your opponent will leave the Grenache in the early game, and so if you had, you know, dropped this, and you can drop this with even Chappie later on, and so when you do your Gauche turn, you can call her either from drop or even from hand. You can hollow her, make him hollow, so that way at the end of the turn you'll flip 2 and you'll bind this and draw a card, and this gives you another card in hand, which is something I thought that was very much more useful than another crit trigger in my play testing. And the funny thing is that my opponent in the finals, Kevin Cho, he Caliban my Cannoneer into a Negerbone, or I picked a Negerbone or a Bale, one of those two. And then by the time he ended his turn, he basically had to timely back the Caliban, and then he chose my grade 1 that I called early on, and I had to call grade 0. And I already had Grenache in drop, so it didn't matter, so I picked the Screaming Banshee and hollowed her. And finally he resolved this turn, She died to hollow on his turn, and I drew a card, and then of course my turn began, stand and draw. So little things like that help out too, and it's fantastic. She also promotes the Galleon turn, where you can abuse stands because all your units are plus 10k. So before you can get multi-attacks going off, you can abuse the beefed up units before you can kill them off with Necrobone. So your barrage, your barrage of attacks in the late game is much more scarier with stands, is what I'm getting at. And I don't know, I just, with playtesting, I found them very useful. That's all. You know, some people like 11 crit, and go for it, you know. The other thing that I would advise again is that really we don't have a crit trigger that has a skill that can benefit, such as like Rough Seas, or Rampage. So it's not really worth. I mean, we have Cody, but Cody brings himself back with his own skill, so that really doesn't count. So let's go with the PGs. I've playtested with Seawall Banshee. A lot of people hate Seawall Banshee. I know, because she discards, she Soul Blasts, and she doesn't outflip. But I mean, the reason I ended up going back to Jhin is because of the countercharge against matchups where you need a PG at damage 3 against Royal. So like, I need a PG, but I still have a face down damage, and doing a Water Spout Jhin right now would help to, you know, that way I can be aggressive on my next turn. Usually Granblue would like to be in the 3 to 4 damage to be effectively aggressive with Gauche turns. And then of course later on you'll get to 5, and then that way you can go a little more ham with Negrosanger and Dragoot or Galleon and so on, and Gauche again if you go into a second time later on. So with the Gears matchup, they're gonna basically return your Grenache, and you're kind of shit out of luck with countercharging. So if you have no more CB and you're at 5 damage, there's no way in hell that you can unflip in Nightrose unless you have this PG. And so I wanted to be safe and pick him over the Seawall Banshee. And with Nightrose, you're able to draw a lot, so you're more often enough draw enough PGs, and of course your heal triggers for G-guarding, so you're like the lack of defense isn't there, so you're safe for most of the time. So because you know, you never know what you draw, but more often enough you draw quite a bit of a number of cards each turn, so you're gonna run into a PG is what I'm getting at. So and that's why I ended up picking Jhin, mainly because of the Gears matchup, because like they're gonna, you know, return your Grenache on your turn, and you're like, fuck, now I can't be as aggressive defensively like with Cannoneer or my next turn. So we play 4 Strider because you want to, you know, stride. You want Nightrose, you want the right Nightrose. Sometimes you can call him and put Starlight in and drop right away if you really want to deck in, or just whatever, you know, get that out. And of course drop setup in that sense. And he's a ghosty, so you can bring him back with Negro Lily, so sometimes you need that with a 7k booster. Or you can put him in front of a Negrobone next turn, so you can like have a 14k column, and then Negrobone will promote another attack, right? And so that's why I play for Negrobone in the sense where he is very good, and I don't know why people drop him to 3. I think he's one of the important pieces that make Nightrose really strong as a deck as a whole. And being able to get at least the 4th battle, kind of like Aquaforce, is huge. So you're bringing back cards like Negarook, which is a 16k beater by himself, Lazy to extend your attacks, Nightstorm to extend your attacks, Mick if you want to power up something 10k, because he only targets hollow units, and you have other plays you can do. And you can even bring Screaming Banshee if you really need the draw, especially if your opponent just had like damage checked triggers. And you're not going to hit numbers, so you might as well get the Screaming Banshee for the extra draw. So you can just branch off in those kind of directions with Negrobone. But again, he's really the card that you need and want in the early game, so that way when you first stride, you already have Negrobone in the column, and you just bring back a King Serpent with Nightrose's stride skill, and you have that 17k column that you're going to hit numbers. So that's why I still play him at 4. And then for the other grade 1 that I play, I only had room enough for Bale. I had Fatal Shade, but I took her out for a different card, and I will mention what. Bale is great because he goes back to deck. He unflips during your battle phase and your opponent's battle phase. So during your battle phase, you can get an extra attack basically if you like pop off with this column or just call over it during the battle phase in the front row. Defensively, when you do the Negro Lily Cannoneer turn, is very valuable because it refunds Negro Lily's counterblast cost, and you just end up spending 1 CB for the Cannoneer cost. And then of course, if you do the Negro Lazy play, it instead of working with 3 counterblasts, you're able to work with 2 counterblasts because you can call Bale first. I mean, you'll call Bale first because you need to resolve Negro Lily, and then you call over the Negro Lazy, and then you can resolve Bale first to get the unflip, and then you can do Negro Lazy to get the Cannoneer, and then the Cannoneer can do the CB cost on top of that to pop something. So, and Bale helps with the late game too when you really need a card in the deck. So he's came in clutch in those moments too. So definitely play a Bale or even at least a Fatal Shade at that point. Fatal Shade's a good card too. It's just I needed to make room for other stuff. Let's see. No, there's the other King Serpent over there. So, this is my grade 2 lineup. Notice how it's basically down to 11 grade 2s. Room had to be made for Chappie, and it hurt me to reduce this guy from 4 to 3, because Negro Lazy is such a good card in the sense of his utility. He extends your attacks. He can get you another unit if you need to during your main phase. He can work basically to set up your defensive play with Cannoneer if you need to. He's great against the Link Joker matchup where you want to Dragoot their field, and then you can call him with Nightrose, and then call him a King Serpent. That way it refunds that counterblast, and then you have 2 free units basically to at least like call and kill, or you can call an extra card or 2 to kill like 4 or 5, 3 or 4 or 5 cards on their field. So it makes it easier to Dragoot on those turns without, dropping down cards from hand. Because Granblue, you don't want to drop cards from hand if you can't. You rather do calling units from the field and have them do your work, and then of course build up your hand. So, Negro Lazy is really good. But other than that, let's go and get into Cannoneer. Cannoneer is also very good because, like I said, he kills things. During your main phase, you can kill Gear Cat, so that way you can go during your turn without worrying about that the head around Gear Cat play. So their Vanguard won't be 21k base, and you can just still dish out your 11k, 16k pokes against them. And of course, it gets you a draw card. Helps if you G assisted too, so it's a -1 in that sense. You could also use it during your opponent's turn, right? You kill their shit. You can ruin columns, you can ruin combo plays, and a good example would be like fucking Wiseman. That thing is scary if you don't have a Cannoneer, and so I had to face Wiseman in round 10, and because of having Cannoneer on play, I was able to survive that turn and then just finish off the next turn. And each tricks that I've done is that at the end phase, I've even called him back with the GB2 skill and not hollow him, but still use the counterblast skill to kill something. You just won't draw a card. The situation when that comes up is when a good example is Gears again. I call this kill their Gear Cat during the main phase, and then during the end phase, I kill like their grade 1 that sits behind the Vanguard, the sniper chick. So that makes it harder for them to go off on their turn, and they have to commit more from their hand and all that stuff, Plus, you're killing their cards, and they have to recycle with Tick Away, which they're usually not going to go into Tick Away because you're going to kill it too. With Negarrook, he's a 16k beater. He's a hollow unit for Negabrone, so just having that one card that's a 16k attacker is really big. He's also great in the early game. If he's still like just chilling, he's an 11k, and he will still poke Vanguard. You can also use Screaming Banshee to make him hollow if he's still stuck from the early game, and he becomes a 16k attacker again. Or not again, but, because he lived from the prior early game. He's a 16k beater now. And then, of course, he dies to hollow at the end phase. But this is a fantastic card, and then, of course, having cards like Galleon make him a 26k beater by himself, too, which is freaking enormous, but just having one unit that beefy. And then, of course, 2 King Serpent. I tried 3, but of course I bumped it down because like having an 8k grade 2, especially if you get 2 early on. It kind of sucks if you ride. And of course, if you go in second, you can't hit 9k units. So the 2 I think is the perfect number, and I compensated that for the consistency to have 2 chappies, so I can at least guarantee 1 King Serpent right before I gouge. And King Serpent 9 times out of 10, you're gonna bring him back with Nightrose, the stride skill. That way it's a 10k grade 2 at that point, and basically having a Negro Bone behind it makes it a 17k column, which is huge. And then of course you can manipulate him during the battle phase, and you can get more attacks that way. So I think we'll just do it this way. So I took out Fatal Shade for an extra Starlight, but before we touch on her, let's cover the basics. Nightrose is the OG. You want 4 copies of if you want to be on her. She has a GB skill, GB2 skill that you want to be on the defensive side with Cannoneer, and then of course if you want you could do the mech play too. Or you could just bring units back to have an extra 5k shield, intercept, or do some different plays and kind of thing. And of course, if you, there were times before where I couldn't stride, and having a Negro Bone kill something and call something else, and then using her GB2 skill to call that killed unit back promotes another attack. So that's a neat thing you can do too. The stride skill, of course, you're always going to bring, like 9 times out of 10, a King Serpent. The reason you keep bringing King Serpent back with her skill is because the counterblast is refunded. So you got a free unit. And then, of course, he soul charges, the soul charge is valuable for Gauche, for Negro Lazy, for the G guards like Negro Nora. So that helps. And, of course, you're able to dig deeper to your deck for units that you probably want to soul blast into your drop and use next turn. So that's important. I got lucky. My SP came in right before I left for the event, and boy, I got a lot of compliments whenever I rode her. Basically, that's a nice looking card. You know, that is Bay. So came in clutch. I have. Let's talk about Nightstorm. Nightstorm is the one card that you still want to play, mainly because of the rear guard skill, where at the end of the battle you can kind of blast one and call something. He helps you extend an extra attack if you're going after Negro Bone. You go Negro Bone into Nightstorm, and then into Negro Lazy, and then into Negro Rook. Instead of like Negro Bone into Negro Lazy into Negro Rook, and you're kind of stopped there, unless you had another Negro Bone in the other column. So having this extra call to have another attack is really valuable. And so that's why I play him. And he's hilarious. If you call him through like a Negro Song turn, he's usually going to be around like 36 or 41k by himself, and then your opponent has to guard all that, and then he can at the end of the battle just call something else after that, like a 16k beater like Negro Rook. And of course you can do other plays too with like mech and all that such. With Starlights, so obviously I was playing 6 grade 3s before. I used to play 5 and I went to 6 because of ride issues. And then right before the event, I was having a little ride into grade 3 issues as well and striding. And so I was like, I would do 7 grade 3s, probably the whale. And then my friend's like, you should play a second Starlight. And I'm like, why? My friend David was saying that there is a kind of like a Starlight loop you can use to like chop down your opponent's hand during the mid game. So that's pretty big. Just having that combo available to you is useful. And it's usually on the Negasanga turn, and I can go over it later on or in a different video. But the idea is that you have this Starlight loop option, and you're running 7 grade 3s, so you wouldn't get grade stuck. And of course she has the Nightrose name, so if you do end up stuck on riding her, you still have the Nightrose name, which is still valuable. And of course I got the Rummy Lover in rare, so it shows how much committed I am to Nightrose, and I really do enjoy playing the deck. So you spend your money what you like. I'm a believer in that, and makes what you paid for worth it. So let's talk about the strides. For Gauche, like I said, he gives you advantage field in hand because of Cannoneer, crits, all with a single counterblast, and then whatever you soul blasted. And then on top of that, he gives them power. So in the late game, you can give units like 4k power boost, or 5k or 6k, and so on. You can make big fields just like doing that. And at the same time, he's your want to go first stride, so you can enable GV2. So having that Cannoneer play is valuable. The early you get it. So the other strat I like is Necrosanger. Necrosanger is there to help extend attacks during the battle phase, and he's much better in the late game because the unit that's called gets 5k for every card face up in the G zone. So when you have like 5 or 6 cards in the G zone, that unit is getting basically 30k. So like a Night Storm would be 41k, for example. You can even bring a King Serpent and it'll be like some big ass number like a 28k or 38k and all that number stuff. So it makes threatening stuff, and of course, it's basically the card right before you go into GB8. And the fact that he persona flips helps. We also play 2 Dragoots, mainly for the Luar matchup, and of course Royal Paladins and sometimes Gold Paladins. But ideally is that you can wipe their board, especially if they call their units from hand. Usually when I play Sanctuary Guard, I deny them Counterblast early on, so they're forced to drop units from the hand, and then you just like Dragoot, and you just like basically get ahead from that, and then of course they have to drop more cards next, or they can't do a better turn because they've lost a field. I noticed that with Sanctuary Guard, Regalia doesn't call units. It works with what it has already, so they have to go into a different strat like Altmile or Legit Sword and so on, all those cards. So if you can avoid those turns, it helps. It's also very helpful against the Lean Joker matchup. Like I said, you can strat with Dragoo, use Nightrose and bring Negro Lazy to bring King Serpent, and you have 2 units already. And if you can call something from hand, you can call 3 or 4 and so on, and it makes it a little easier to board wipe, even on Royal Paladins. I did that in the tournament too. I had a Negerbone, and then I called Negro Lazy and King Serpent, and then I just called 1 card from hand, and then I just wiped the board with 4 units, basically. The second one is there in case, it drags on with Luard. I didn't face Luard, surprisingly. I faced everything else. So I never got into the second one. I don't know. I might keep it or not. It just depends. So the other strats, we have Obadiah and Galleon. Obadiah is there in case you have a shitty field, or you have not a shitty field, you have a shitty drop zone, you have no soul, you don't kind of want to use hand as much, but the idea is that he's still useful in that sense if you really need combo pieces. And then if you have a Negerbone from the early game, you can mill King Serpent, Negro Lazy, and Negro Rook. Bring back King Serpent, refunds Night versus Stride skill, you can attack, call Negro Lazy to call Negro Rook, and you got 4 attacks if you didn't call anything on this side. You can get 5 attacks if you call something and poke with that. So there's that play you can do, and people don't expect that, especially on an Obadiah turn. Like, wait, he's gonna get 4 or 5 attacks on an Obadiah turn? What the fuck? Especially if you're like at 2 damage, that helps too. And if you can gouge, then that's the way to go. So Galleon, the boat, he pretty much finished every game that I showed him. I fucked up 1 turn in the tournament. I'll go in my tournament report about that later on. But ideally, he just wins games because your field is huge. You typically bring 2 Negro Rooks, 2 Negro Bones, and then Grenache for the booster for the Vanguard, and then go ham from there. If you're low on Counterblast, you'll call 2 Keen Serpents instead of the Negro Rooks, and they're still swinging for 18k beat sticks, and then you just unflip 2, and your Negro Bones will go off into like Night Storms and Negro Lazies, and they bounce between each other and all that shenanigans. You're getting a bunch of attacks, and then of course, when you use mech and shuffle them back to deck, your deck's kind of low at this point. And if you have any more stand triggers like the Screaming Banshee still in deck, you typically want to attack with a unit or 2, and then of course do the drive check to get that stand trigger and still benefit more off the 10k boost from that unit, right? If you have a 19k Cannoneer and restand him is a 24, that's still huge. That's big. So that's very useful. Very easy to get GBA in this deck because of Negrosanger and Gauche, and of course your Negronora G-Guards. And then Seabreeze because the grade 2 game, if you really need to. I didn't go in Seabreeze the whole tournament, so I guess I'm glad I didn't. You can, if you have 3 Counterblasts and you have a Negerbone with a Grenache on board, you can Seabreeze, and then you can either, if you have a King Serpent, you could bring it over Grenache and you refund that, and then you still have 1 Counterblast to use for Negerbone and bring back Grenache to flip 2. So the Seabreeze cost isn't as big. Or if you didn't have it, you could just kill the Grenache with the Negro Bone and then bring it back and hollow it, and then you just unflip 2. So, smart ways to refund your costs from the Sabri's turn. That's huge. So, we have 5 G-Guards. Negro Lily because Cannoneer play, and it's a 25k shield that's actually pretty easy to achieve. You just counter blast and kill one of your units. Nightrose can bring it back with the GB2 skill, hence the Cannoneer play, the Mick play. He brings his own ghosty, either Tommy or Bale usually. That's helpful if it's a Bale. It's very helpful with a Bale because you can basically negate his cost. And the Gleam is for the discard draw. Sometimes you want to discard a Cannoneer if you don't have one in the drop yet, and you just get a new card, whether it's bigger shield or a card you can use for stride, or just, you know, combo off and stuff. So that helps filter your hand and set up your drop zone at the same time. So it's still valuable, and sometimes you even G-Guard with it at the first, so you're setting up your GB. You know, your generation break life if you G-Guard it first, in that kind of sense. So, and then finally the Nightrose. Very good card. Easy. You basically, it's a 30k shield, so making your Vanguard 41k is very easy to achieve. You just call a grade 0 or a grade 1 or 2 from the drop, and if you call Chappie, you can get something that you want to mill out and use for your turn coming up. So that's huge. And also with the heal trigger, you can activate the heal trigger's skill to discard and draw as well. So you can discard and draw your hand. Filter your hand more while doing this. So, and she flips. So I play 2 because she's a really good G-Guard, and the fact that she flips, if you Dragoot, you can still G-Guard twice and still go to GB8 on 3rd stride. Believe it or not, I actually second strode Galleon before. I G-Guarded 3 times, and 2 of the times were the Nightrose. And of course, I forced strode on Gauche. My opponent strode first with Commander Tavos, and then I strode with Gauche, and then they did Wailing, and I basically G-Guarded 1 attack, and then I G-Guarded twice on the Wailing, so the Wailing wouldn't hit. And then I just GB8 the next turn on 2nd stride, which is hilarious, and it's powerful. Like, holy crap, I never thought I can do that. But yeah, so that's pretty much for the deck profile. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I felt really confident in this deck going into the tournament, and it did me well. And so, like I said, I think Granblue is still strong, and I wanted to take it with me to prove it that it's still strong. I saw a lot of people like trying to sell it off on Facebook or whatever. They thought that, you know, without 4 mix it's garbage. No, it's not garbage. It's still very strong, and you don't really have to rely on mech as much as you would think, especially with Galleon available. And honestly, I don't use mix effect that often to begin with when we had 4, so I didn't feel like we lost too much. And Screaming Banshee is actually a great card still, so I recommend playing her, and it saved me in some matchups. Even gauching first turn with a Screaming Banshee at top of your crits or other units, you just get another card in hand. And she's a booster, so you can call Screaming Banshee and she's a 4k, so that's a 14k attack, and she gets you a card back in hand, so it's not wasted, you know? So I am happy that it got me so far. I performed well, and I misplayed sometimes. I will cover that more in the tournament report. If you guys have any questions of still why I pick 7 grade 3s, 2 Starlight, 3 Screaming Banshees, and yada yada yada, feel free to ask. I'm willing to help. It's just through playtesting and experience I came up with these strategies and these deck choices, and of course my friends contributed with their input, especially David from Australia, Adipatama is his last name, so shout out to him. I'm going to shout out to a lot of people in the tournament report and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, Granblue, exciting. Got me to 2nd place, and I'm very happy. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Remember, like, share, subscribe, comment. Bye.